Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, From Findings Fatigue to Strategic Focus, How Intelligent Automation Transforms Risk Prioritization. My name is Ethan Bresnahan. I'm the Senior Marketing Director here at CyberSecurity. And today I'm excited to welcome CyberSecurity co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer, Patrick O'Reilly, and Chief Product Officer, Matt Alderman. We're so glad that you can join us. As always, feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation. And with that, we'll hand things off to Matt and Patty. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan.
All right.
Good to be here.
We're gonna jump into some slides first, and then we're gonna demo.
Exciting.
Exciting. All right. Let's see. Let's bring up these slides. All right. And let's change our layout so you can actually see us. Ah, look. There we are. All right.
It's great.
All right. So we're going to get into this concept of prioritized findings today, Patty. And as I structure my podcast, I like to talk problem, solution, and then value.
Right.
So we're going to start with the problem. Ready?
Yeah.
Does anybody feel like this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Drinking
I recognize
from a
that problem.
Yeah.
It's my life story.
Yeah, we've heard from clients that issues and findings management is like drinking from a fire hose, where they get literally thousands of issues a day and they just keep stacking up. Like they come in, but they don't have enough resources, they don't have enough context, and all they do is just keep adding more and more and more issues to their database.
Yeah, reflexively. Yeah.
So I thought this was a pretty good way to summarize the findings management problem as a whole, as it feels like you're drinking from a fire hose.
Agreed. That's what it looks like from outside. Or if we went with another metaphor, you're basically building a maze and walling yourself into it.
Oh, that's another good one. Yeah. So why is this the case? The case is we have a lot of data. The problem is we kind of almost have too much data. Patty, you and I have talked about this for a long time. The industry doesn't have a data problem. I mean, outside of the fact that we have lots of data sources, I mean, there's over 4,000 security products now. That doesn't even include your IT infrastructure data elements. We have a lot of data.
Tons.
But tons. But the thing we're really missing in the industry, I keep saying it, it's context. Like, how does all this data relate to each other? And to me, that's one of the biggest challenges in the industry is I've got 65, 75 tools as a CISO. I have lots of data, but I don't understand how the data across all those tools actually connect together in a way that helps me make sense of it.
Right. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And, one of the sort of reflective parts of that is the balkanization or the separation of teams. Security products make their own data. The first line of defense makes their own data. The second line of defense makes their own data. Risk and compliance make their own data. And then, the senior management have their own preferred data. How do you unify that? How do you enrich the data that people use and gain insight? Everybody knows that we need to enrich the data and translate the data. So it's one of my favorite problems because we're right in the middle of it. And we have access to all the different data types.
Yes. In this kind of iceberg in the middle is really interesting, right? When you think about all the potential sources for an issue or a finding to be generated. Right? It could come from my GRC tool. It could come from my third-party assessment, Deloitte, EY, whoever. It could come from data sources directly. It could come from my manual efforts. Like, there's so many places that a finding or an issue could get tracked. How do you also consolidate all that in a way that makes sense, right? Which is why I think a lot of people are frustrated with their existing findings or issues management process, because they're just coming in, they just keep stacking up, and now they have to figure out what to do with it, and there's no effective way to triage most of the stuff that's coming into the platform.
No, too many cooks in the kitchen, and not enough visibility.
Yeah, exactly. So this is becoming a crowded market. There's a lot of people focused on this all of a sudden. And I think here's part of the reason. If we step back a little bit, we as an industry have done a really bad job at prioritizing outcomes in general. I work for two of the big three vulnerability companies, Tenable and Qualys. Most people know this. It's not secret. It's on my LinkedIn profile, both prior to IPO. We struggled at this problem because although we had really, really good data about the vulnerability, the exploit, the CVSS scores, we still were really bad at prioritizing which vulnerabilities are the most impactful to an organization.
Right.
And it was because we lacked context of the business side. What are the critical assets? What is the business impact if those assets go down? We were missing the asset context. We were missing the business context. And so even through, I'm going to date myself a little bit, even into 2015 to 2020, right? There was this big gap in really understanding how to prioritize even a simple thing like a vulnerability, okay?
Yeah.
And a whole new market emerged around threat and vulnerability management. It's the precursor to CTEM, continuous threat and exposure management market, that these vendors came in and was trying to take existing vulnerability data with asset and business data context and trying to build a better mousetrap, right? And we saw a number of these products emerge, and some of them still exist today. Kenna Security, which was bought by Cisco, Sevco, Nucleus. There's a bunch of platforms there. And they're trying to pull this data together, but they're still very kind of vuln-centric.
Yep.
So we've struggled heavily just with something simple like a vulnerability, let alone all the other data elements out there. My threat landscape, my control posture, the risks out there.
Yeah.
And so this market gets way more complex than just a simple vulnerability prioritization, which we have just absolutely struggled with.
Yeah, it gets much more complex. And I think vuln management is the perfect example and you were in the trenches, so you've seen it. Context is everything. Without context, you're really just aggregating things and you're adding to the pile. The only way to get the pile through the pile and understand which things to address in the pile is by context, through enrichment. So, you make a very good point there. There's only so much more of making the problem difficult for ourselves we can do humanly before we need to solve it. And one of the optimistic things about what we're doing at the moment is that the complexity, can be handled by some of the new technological advancements. So let's talk a little bit about where we're headed.
Yeah, I do want to definitely get there, but I also want to just talk about some of these key differentiators for a second, because I think this is what makes us unique in this space, right? Is that we have a lot more context in the platform than some of these other products do. And the real-time nature of that data. So let me, right, if we think about the legacy GRC vendors for a second, right? I also spent 2.5 years at Archer. My first startup was in the GRC space. If you think about the legacy GRC systems, right, which also will try to get into the space because they're trying to aggregate some of this data too, and they have some of it, don't get me wrong. The challenge there will be how frequent is the data? How real time is the data, right?
Right.
Issues are changing constantly. If you're out doing an assessment once a year, you don't have the latest control posture.
No.
You just don't, right? And so I think it's really important for people to think about, what do you look for in a prioritized finding management solution? Because it's got to be more than what we get out of our vuln management systems. It has to be more real time than what we get out of our GRC platforms. And something has to kind of fit in the middle. And I think that's where we fit well. And it's because we have the business understanding, because we have the asset data in the system. We have the controls and the risk tied to those assets in the system. That's something unique about what we have. And we're getting that control data in a real-time way through our continuous control automation, through some of our other techniques of automation that we put into the system, including our evidence collection capability, our policy automation capability. We can get updated control data in pretty much any frequency we want, daily, weekly, monthly, it doesn't matter, right? So we have real-time data on your control posture tied to all your assets in the system. Like, there's not many systems that even have that data to start with.
Right.
Then we overlay some of this other data that's external to us. Now you start to get some interesting capabilities in the platform.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, years ago, we were sitting through presentations looking at risk assessments in GRC products that were built on 6-month-old data. And everyone knew, even at the time, that those just were not going to fly. That was not the way to go. So our ability to automate and capture data on your assessments, on your controls in real time, and associate it, across the other data types and into risk, and even into actuarial structures, that's where you really start to pull out some insight.
Exactly. And that's what makes us so unique in this set of capabilities. So, all right. So where do we see this in the landscape of things, right? So if you think about our vision is to marry two really interesting sets of data together. What we kind of call the cyber risk intelligence layer. So on the left is our traditional telemetry sources, data that we already can pull into the platform through our continuous control automation sources. So that's your configuration and policy data from various tool sets, whether it's your security configuration management tools, your endpoints, your cloud infrastructure, your CSPMs, the list goes on and on and on. That data is influencing control state. How effective are my controls? I'm getting that real time. Again, daily, weekly, monthly, you can set those frequencies in the platform. So I'm getting real time control data coming in and scoring my overall control effectiveness in the platform. A lot of those controls are linked to our risk scenarios and the risk data that we have in the platform, both for client custom risks as well as some of the actuarial risks that we pull in automatically. So that's giving me real-time risk and control data, right? That's in the platform today. But what we're doing then is marrying the external data, right? And this is where you spent a lot of time, Patty, over the last year and a half plus, is how do we take in threat data, vulnerability data, MITRE ATT&CK, all those other data elements that aren't natively in the platform, but are going to help us influence this concept of prioritizing and acting on a set of findings.
Right. Yeah. And, the ability to take in that additional context, it's, the industry's been wanting to do this for years. Every great open source project or, sort of government adjacent project like MITRE has been wanting to do this for years. I've sat in meetings with government officials and had them say, what we really need to understand is how much bang for the buck we're getting. And I'm like, well, you're just going to have to get a few more data types stitched together. So some of the exciting things we're doing with MITRE ATT&CK is, we're actually looking at the probabilities that certain TTPs will be leveraged in chains, So there's a whole just pile of insight that can come out of stitching the data together and understanding it analytically together. So we don't even have to necessarily pull it into the platform in order to enrich findings with additional ways of understanding what you should prioritize.
Remember the old CCE project, Common Control Enumeration, right?
Yeah.
The nirvana was that I would have CCEs mapped to CVEs. And so we could look at a vulnerability, look at its mitigating or compensating control, and decide whether that vulnerability really could pose a concern for me. But that project was abandoned years ago, right?
Yes.
No one's ever, I guess I haven't seen it anywhere outside of what we've been doing, but no one's really attempted to try to figure that out. Can you talk a little bit about kind of our approach to how we kind of tackle that simple mapping?
Yeah. That's one of the most that's one of the outstanding ones, one of the disappointing ones that everyone had to walk away from because either the money dried up or teams changed. So the common configuration enumeration, and in addition, understanding how TTPs map to vulnerabilities, right? So what is CVE to TTP? There were some open source projects on that one as well. They were driven by using certain natural language processing models. So taking the language of the vulnerability, then extracting simple vectors out of it, relating it to BERT models, and then getting a mapping right from CVE to TTP. If you can go from CVE to TTP, you can go from TTP to control. So you can recreate the CCE sort of solution set and complete it by doing this. And then you can filter, not only that, you can simplify those mappings by looking at the common weakness enumeration, for example. So if you're looking at the common weakness enumeration, about half of the vulnerabilities out there are classed with that. You can take their mitigations, relate it then to TTP, and relate it then to the actual control set. And you can begin to have what are the controls, what are the groupings, but what are the highest priority ones, right? Which is what we really need to know. We don't need to just pile up controls, which the industry has gotten very good at. Here's the 60 controls that you should look at, right? I mean, that doesn't again, that's just adding to the pile. We need to actually, focus on what in the pile is the most important. And I'm glad you brought up CCE, because that was a beautiful project that sort of just everyone just sort of left the skeletons of it lying around, and we've revisited it for certain.
Yeah, and again, I think what people have to understand, I think it's probably best on this next slide, is that what you've built in the CyberSync AI engine is the ability to model these relationships.
That's right.
Which are not trivial, by the way.
No.
And I think, I think through the common use case, like the first one that comes to mind, which we've talked about, and there's some improvements coming on our side, is I have a brand new CVE. I make this up. Log5j comes out tomorrow, right? Do I care about Log5j?
Right.
Should I care about Log5j? Right?
Exactly.
For people to answer that question, there's a lot of manual effort they need to do to figure out, well, which systems does Log5j run on? And do I have those systems? So I need my asset inventory. And heaven forbid it's up to date, because most organizations don't have an updated asset repository. So that's one challenge, right? But then I have to decide, well, are those assets running any of my critical business functions? So do they impact revenue? I don't know, maybe. Do I have that mapping even? And then I have to go through and go, well, are there mitigating or compensating controls in place that might mitigate the impact of Log5j? Like, just for people to understand, like, that's a lot of work. But what you've built in the model is we can pretty quickly tell you whether there's control gaps on assets within your environment that pose high levels of risk, to help you start to understand the potential impact of a brand new vulnerability like Log5j.
Right. And to get that information into the hands of the people who are capable of using it quickly, because a lot of the people in our industry can credibly go through and answer these questions. They can do the analysis, they understand all the components of the analysis, but they're buried in other stuff. So they're looking at other piles. So to have the ability to model these things in a GNN or a neural net structure, where the relationships are already there, and all you really need to do is insert a new data type, embed it, get its dot product, related to the other data types, you can then answer questions very quickly that are quite complex, but you can answer them in a simple way, because you don't really want to answer all these questions with just a 10-page analysis that everyone's going to have to go through, because we need to get insight into the hands of the professionals very quickly. And the only way to do that, because the human brain is just not configured to take a 10 variable problem and provide a quick answer, but models like this can do that, and are really important for decision support. I think in the long run, I think this is where we're headed in our industry.
Exactly right. Because really, at the end of the day, all of us in this space are really decision support systems. Our goal is to provide data to help the human make a decision.
Right.
Whether I should mitigate a risk, accept a risk, avoid the risk, whatever, right? Because at the end of the day, whether we talk in risk terms or not, the way the business runs is all about risk terms. They have to understand, will this impact revenue substantially enough for me to want to do something about it? And is the cost of mitigation worth the potential risk on the downside?
Right.
Everything in our industry ultimately has to be measured through that lens. Very few products do it. The more we can do that and make it easy, which is why understanding the potential dollar impact for these findings, I think, is so important, Patty, because how do I go to my CFO or my CEO and say, look, this new vulnerability came out. We think it could have major impact, but it's going to cost us, $1 million to mitigate.
Right. Right.
Wait, I might want to spend that $1 million on something else. Maybe there's not enough risk on the downside. So how do you know? But if you can quantify its impact to its cost, now you can figure out whether there is actually, it's worth the investment. And that's a risk management decision.
Absolutely. And risk management is the way that business is conducted. So, we're not immune in information security. We have to speak in terms of how we prioritize things. And your Log4j example is great, because it may not, it may not even be worth mitigating.
Right.
Or it might come in 9th place, or it might come in 15th place, or it may be really, really important, and it might be tied to some horrible long-tailed losses because it's around some critical business system, and you can't afford any kind of probability on that. Even a low likelihood could still lead to massive impacts, and you get that by looking at the historical data. You get that by looking at the attack surface. You get that by looking at the business impact and its context. So the only way to really answer these questions is using context.
Yes. And the context is in this model that you've built, which I think is amazing. I had a little video of it, but we couldn't embed the video of it actually playing. This is a screenshot of it. You and Henry have done a really interesting visualization of the different nodes and how they connect, and just the sheer complexity of what you've had to model in the AI engine.
Yeah, and in some sense, it's the sheer complexity we've all been dealing with, and we know it. But to see it, actually represented, it gives us all, I think, an appreciation for what we've been dealing with. And we need a bit of help.
Yep. Talk a little bit about the different AI methodologies, right? Because what I think is what most people have to understand is that this has been an evolution of not only enhancements in the different AI methodologies, but how we're also using different AI methodologies in the platform to solve for additional capabilities.
Yeah. No, this is great. I'm glad you brought up this slide. I think this is just very helpful to think about how we have historically as a company leveraged AI, but also just, helps, I think, more generally, people in the industry understand the different types of AI and the sort of AI washing that goes on. So sometimes, in our industry right now, you can't be without some AI. So everyone's running around claiming they've got agents solving everything, but in reality, you should have an appreciation for which AI fits which problem, and that's very important. So we used NLP early days, and we used it for a very simple thing, to relate control frameworks to control frameworks. So, as in our industry, there are some great open source projects and some paywalled projects that relate control frameworks to each other. NIST publishes relationships of controls to each other, but they don't publish the actual control action. So they might tell you AC2 relates to 911 or 921 and ISO 27001, but they're not going to tell you which part of AC2 that 911 or 921 relate to. NLP is very good at that. It can say, okay, of the one component we see on 27001, it relates to these 4 components on AC2, of which there are maybe 13 or 14. GNN, and that's helped us solve a lot of crosswalking, which is just making sure that control frameworks can talk to each other. Most of our industry has a need to understand information in other contexts. So we help our customers just translate information across different control frameworks. GNNs exist because they come out of a lot of research that started in the 90s around neural nets, and they're very useful for data types, for relating data each to each, right? So you have nodes and edges, right? So a MITRE TTP might relate to a control. Those are 2 nodes. You've got an edge. You can even characterize what's going on in the edge. This is a tight relationship. It might be a little looser, but nonetheless it exists. And then you can build out an engine of these edges and nodes, and you can understand the deterministic relationships of these edges and nodes, but you can also understand the probabilistic relationships of those nodes and edges. So GNNs are very useful largely because you can model complex systems with them, right? And that's what we're trying to do in cyber. They're also very useful, and not a lot of people in the industry know this yet, because they help with the LLM's hallucination problem. What happens with LLMs, and we've all been sort of amazed by some of the capabilities that LLMs have demonstrated, and they are very powerful. But we don't always know how they're coming to the conclusion they're coming to, especially if they have lots of parameters. So you can send an LLM off with a fairly complex prompt, and it'll come back and it'll give you an answer. Then send it off with the same prompt, and it'll come back with a slightly different answer. Now, what's happening? It really is a little hard to answer. So while context can be very long, you're sending it out and it's trying to answer the problem each time in a unique way. Now, if you can get the LLM talking to a GNN structure, then all of a sudden you've put it on a playground, and it can be a lot more effective, and it's going to hallucinate less. So we use LLMs all over the place now. We use them in product to summarize things. We use them to take some of the GNN's results and give some really intuitive understanding, because you can't just do a JSON dump on people. You can with some people, but they're special. Yeah. But you want to, if you're going to, the models will give you beautiful JSONs, beautiful. But you need to translate that into actionable human language so that people can actually talk about what they're doing with other people, right?
Because your CFO and your CEO are not going to understand a JSON file.
No, and if you come away with anything today, don't hand your CFO a JSON. Okay, so that's probably good wisdom. Then there's agentic computer vision. Matt, and you've been really working on this a lot lately. This is very exciting because what does it do? Well, it opens up a whole set of other applications to us that have control data. Now, a lot of applications, that are pure cyber applications like CSPMs and endpoint management will often tell you how they think they relate to certain controls. So they're like, well, we think we have the CSF covered here with some of this, and we think we have 853 covered with this. But there are a lot of products out in the market that are used all the time that have cyber information embedded in them that are not going to do any work on how they relate to controls. Agentic allows us to collect evidence, which is a beautiful thing because we've all sat around tables for days talking to each other about evidence. That just sort of productivity gain, but then it can rationalize that. It can screenshot it, translate it, push it to an LLM, and then we can begin to understand its control context, which is really a thing of beauty. So I'm very excited about the work you've done on agentic, because I think it's opening up a new frontier, in a sense, for control information.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're using all these techniques, right? Three of these are used just in findings alone. And then when we get to the agentic side, the whole new evidence collection capability we launched right around Black Hat uses another 3 of these models on the other side, right? And so
that's right.
To your point, you're using different AI models and methodologies here in the platform to continue to do more automation and more prioritization. Really, at the end of the day, if you think about our strategy as a company, it's more automation and better prioritization. Because if we solve those two, the ability to provide real-time prioritized findings to clients will help them make better, faster decisions to mitigate potential downstream risks. And that's all we're trying to build.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And I think it's an important thing to do. I think I think it's going to increase just generally the safety and the resilience of all the companies out there, and it's going to lead to much better outcomes, which is what we all want.
Yes. So enough talking. It's time to show it.
There it is.
All right.
Excited.
So, all right. Let's see. I got to find the right one. Should be this one. All right, everyone. You should see my platform. So in the first release of Prioritized Findings, what we did, and Patty, you can probably explain this a little better, is we looked at existing emerging threats from some threat feeds, ran them through the GNN with actual control and risk data from the CyberStrong platform, and produced a set of findings. Did I summarize that right?
Yeah, I think you got it just about right. Yep.
And so what we did, folks, is we dropped those findings right onto the homepage. Now there's some additional enhancements coming as we build out a broader findings management system. But what we wanted to do was say, based off the latest threats, based on your industry, based on your current risk and control environment, these are the areas we think you should focus on. So you'll see the top 5 listed on the homepage currently if you're a CyberStrong client. And some interesting information. So number 1, there's a finding with basically a recommendation. We believe you should implement centralized log management, encrypted file storage, and immutable backups to protect critical data. That's because we see some gaps on some controls that are related to some risks. And not only have we identified this potential finding, we've also identified the potential impact of this finding. Now, details kind of sit below, right? So I have my control data. So I have some risk assessment, no impact to AT. So this is a demo environment that's got some data in it, but you can see that our risks here are kind of tallied up. And you've also provided back some of the TTPs that are impacted as part of this threat vector.
That's right. Yeah, and right now they're showing the tactics, but when the TTPs come into system, they're going to be chained with what's being leveraged in the wild now, related to your sector specifically, because the threat feeds will come in with tagged sector information. So you're not going to get the same answer in healthcare that you are going to get in finance. So we're going to do more visualization around the TTPs. We're going to show some of the probabilities down at that level. And that's how you can better allocate resource, on what the attackers are going after now, and how you can shift maybe resource to address what's in the wild at the moment on your assets.
Yep. So we list these here. So there's 5 of them here. Now, the other thing to note is they vary, right? So the first 2 are this asset group, my Alderman knowledge base. The next two are from my Alderman sales system, and the fifth one is back from my Alderman knowledge base, right? So it's also looking at the context of this data by your asset structures in the platform. So it's looking at it, it's scoping it by your asset groups, which helps you then prioritize. So in theory, 3 of the top 5 findings are on this Alderman knowledge base application, 2 are on this. But here's some of the interesting stuff. So I have a list of all the controls here, right? So I don't have, if I drill into this, you're going to see that these controls aren't fully implemented. Let's say I fully implement these controls. So I'm going to update those scores. I also just updated the risk calculations, by the way. And I also just triggered the findings updates to take into account the new control and risk data. So it's also going to update some of my findings as well. And so I might see some difference and change. Now I got to wait for the system to process those changes. So I don't know how real time they are, but I can also go in and change maybe a couple more. Down here, I've got some audit and accountability findings, some system integrity flaw remediations. Again, as I'm changing these, we're going to send the findings management system this new data, because I'm not only updating control state, but I am also updating the risk posture. So if I were to drill into one of these assets, right, my knowledge base, and drill into the risk register in this particular case, some of these risks are going to be shifting, right? So you're going to see some trend changes over time. You're going to see trend changes within specific risks that are tied to these, which could be associated to ransomware, right? I'm seeing changes in my risk posture. So as I'm updating this data in this platform, that's new data now available to the findings engine. And eventually these will update. I needed to kick, it hasn't triggered those, but I was trying to do it live for folks. But these will get updated with new impact values, and they might shift order. The order might get shifted around because these are actually prioritized by the impact values. So as an impact value drops down in some of these findings, new ones will surface to the top in the platform. Eventually, all the findings will be listed in a new findings management interface. So the team is working right now on expanding findings beyond these initial findings that are quantified and prioritized. And they're starting to build out there'll be a new tab over here for findings, and all the findings will be listed there. So it won't just be the top 5, it'll be more. Then you'll start to be able to have statusing and workflow on those findings. And that'll allow you to do some initial triage and eventually do some long-term remediation. So findings will ultimately get tied into remediation, leveraging our asset and risk data or the assessment and risk data from controls and risks into the platform. So as we continue to build out this capability, you'll have a lot more control on where you can create findings, how to kind of triage those findings, and then ultimately how to remediate these findings in the platform.
That's right. And it won't be an endless pile. It will always be reprioritizing itself.
Exactly right. And I think that's the interesting part, Patty, right? Is as changes are happening in the system, as impacts are getting updated, you're constantly going to get the reprioritized list of what are the top ones that can mitigate the most risk for an organization today.
That's right. That's right. Yep. And then the service that lives outside the platform is talking to the GNN, and you know that's how the calculation happens. So you know, it's a constant conversation between the core CyberStrong product and the GNN, and the result is what Matt just showed capably.
Yes. So that's our demo for this particular webinar, and it's really up to Q&A. I don't know if we have any questions that have come up. I'm going to my little questions bar. No questions yet. So I'll wait maybe a minute, see if any questions come in, Patty, that anybody has to answer. But I thought that was a pretty good overview of what you built.
Yeah,
a lot of this was
very
on
good.
your plate. Yeah.
Yeah, very good overview. And you know, I'm just very excited because we have so many more sort of finding types in the pipeline as well. And I think this is the approach you have to take going forward. You have to enrich your program with more and more intelligence, and you have to use the real-time information. And the only way to do that is using some of the techniques that Matt ran through on this presentation. So very excited. You know, I can't wait for the future on this one, because I think we are solving a problem that almost everyone I talk to, you know, who is kind of a thought leader, you know, when I show this to research scientists in our field, they're like, wow, you know, that's you guys are really going for it. And I think we are on this one. I think we're going for it. And, you know, I'm grateful for all the help in-house, and I'm grateful to our customers as well, because, you know, they've helped us think this through as well. So it's really, it takes a village on this one. And, you know, the insights are going to, I think, just make us more secure generally.
Yeah. And I think help organizations just really focus on the highest priorities. Like at the end of the day, we know that our clients can only get so much done any given day, any given week.
Yeah.
Our job is to try to help them identify what those top things are and let them focus on the things that are most important, that will provide the most impact to the organization. If we can do that effectively through this model and through these prioritized findings, I think our clients are just in a better position. And to me, that's a win. That's a win for everybody.
Yeah, it's a big win. Yeah, absolutely. Fully agree.
All right. I don't see any questions, Patty, so we're going to wrap this up. Always a pleasure getting on a webcast with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll be talking again before long, no doubt.
Yes. If anybody does have questions, please forward them through the website, through email, whatever. We'll get back to you. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you on the next webcast. Bye.
Thanks all. Take care.